We are so glad to have you here on Mental Health Hookup with Barbara Wilson. I'm your host, Jason Downs. And as always, this is a special broadcast here at KHTS, your hometown station, because mental health is important to us, and we believe it is important to the well-being of our community. Today is March 21st, and this is Women's History Month, and we want to celebrate our women and lift up our women, especially those who are struggling because of much of our mental health as people. This is my belief. Much of our mental health as people depends upon the mental health of our women. I'm sure you've heard Michelle Obama say, "We know that the measure of any society is how it treats its women and girls," and that starts with education. So let's continue our mental health education today with Barbara Wilson. I'm so glad you've joined us here on Mental Health Hookup. Here's to your good health and good health for all. Mental Health Hookup is a nonprofit and is dedicated to providing clinical support to families affected by serious mental illness in the Santa Clarita Valley and beyond. Whatever mental health services you need, they can provide, or they will hook you up with someone who can. They should be your first and last stop for mental health in Santa Clarita. So if you or a member of your family or anyone you know is suffering from mental illness, reach out and make an appointment today at mentalhealthhookup.org or by calling 661-799-7994 to speak to a live agent 24 hours a day. You can set up an appointment with Barbara there. So once again, we're fortunate to have Barbara Wilson with us to take your calls. Of course, Patty will be standing by to field anyone who calls in. So please do. We welcome it. 661-298-5487 is the number to call and speak to Barbara today. That's 661-298-5487. Barbara has a Master of Social Work degree and has worked as a licensed clinical therapist in the state of California for 50 years. Is it 50 plus now? Okay. So today's topic is women. We are in praise of women on the show today, and we are highlighting women's issues, concerns, support, and validation. What's on your mind today, Barbara?
I think you kind of said it all. It is Women's History Month, and as a biological woman, it there are people that think that that means that it's anti-male, and that is not it. I am the mother of a son, so certainly we're not. To honor a woman does not mean you take away from men, but simply that there needed to be some formal recognition of the differences in access to resources that women many times face. I can just tell you when years ago, women were denied access to credit even if they were working full time, and just a lot of things were very different. Um, so
So we have come some distance.
we have come a long way, baby. Do we have farther to go? Yes, we do. We are one of the only countries on the planet that has not signed an international agreement called CEDAW. That's CEDAW, and it stands for something like the Committee to Against Discrimination. I forget exactly what it stands for. You can Google it. But we were just
Discrimination
talking
against
about
women.
against
Obviously,
women
yeah.
and girl children to provide them equal access. Many families in many cultures, including some of our own, for example, privilege educating the male children. They'll send them to college, but not the female children. They say, well, you're going to get married, so you don't need an education and all of that. So we do
Well,
have a
so
ways to go.
speaking of mental health and in light of that, how do we go about validating and dealing with invalidation? I mean, you talked yesterday as we were planning the show about how women still struggle with feeling invalidated,
There are
even during
many,
Women's
many,
History Month.
there are many ways in which I think many times women have been so silenced. We talked, I think, a month or so ago about the importance of having voice. So sometimes people just need the space, a space, safe space, to be able to just say, ow, this hurts. It doesn't mean they want to overthrow the natural order of things. It just means that right now, in this particular situation, this is really uncomfortable and I don't see any options. Many times we know from therapy, actually, we know that if therapy was a product, it works so successfully so much of the time that it would be a top seller.
Hmm.
And we always wonder, why doesn't everyone have access to therapy? Because we know that simply the process of talking out loud, verbalizing, getting the oxygen going through the lungs and the body, that when people talk out loud about what's troubling them, or maybe they're not even sure that this is a legitimate concern, that they begin to find their own solutions. It works. It absolutely works. So this is an important tool, and women find it in all kinds of ways. Like there used to be something centuries ago called bathhouses, and they were for women during the unclean period of the month.
Hmm.
And so the men would not want to be around them, their husbands. And so the women, in order to cleanse themselves and to be acceptable to the man in their life, they were they had to go away to a different part of the
Hmm.
community. And these women would then, they were in this one space, a tent or whatever, and they would talk about what was going on in their particular family tent. And, those spaces began to be very healing, so that women actually started to look forward to going so that they could talk to the other women and get a little
Reminds me of
support
a
and
beautiful
feedback.
book that I read called The Red Tent.
It is that.
Yeah.
That's exactly, yeah.
That's exactly what it was
Yeah.
about. Ancient, Jewish tribes, I
Yeah.
guess, in that instance. But yes, it was a sort of a sacred and special. They had their time with
But
each.
if the men had really known that they were enjoying it, I don't know if they would have
Oh, really?
continued.
Oh no, no.
Because what
Do
we
you
tend,
think so little of us? Come on.
when,
What in our history has
well,
led you
I
to?
I tell you, when women get together for whatever reason, it seems to be threatening to
Seems to make men uneasy.
male.
Yes,
It makes them uneasy. Yeah, they're like, oh, what are you guys
there's a little
talking
too much
about?
power
Yeah.
consolidated in one place.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so the therapy process absolutely works, and it's not always called therapy. In fact, most of the time it probably isn't. It's probably, the girls' night out is really
So you're saying you can get some healthy validation even in
yeah.
those
Oh yeah,
less
those
formal,
very
those less formal.
informal, my girlfriends, my besties. One of the things that nursing mothers I hear a lot of, one of the things that helps them to heal so much is when they have a night out with their girlfriends from breastfeeding. That they're not that they don't like breastfeeding, but simply that they need to have that space where nobody's attached to their body and using their body for, they want their whole body for themselves for 2 or 3 hours. And
I can
like,
only imagine.
yes, it's just my body for me. Oh my gosh. So, yeah. And of course, the lack of sleep that goes with that.
So you mentioned that therapy itself, if it were what more validated than it currently is, that if it were a product on the shelf, it would be a bestseller kind of
Absolutely.
thing. What's standing in the way of that validation? Finally, I mean,
Of course, it's stigma with a
okay,
capital S, like in Sam. Yes, stigma is huge. Still, it is I think the number one. I mean, I don't have research that I can quote, but I know that stigma is a big factor, huge factor, in whether or not people will seek mental health services. Funny thing, I went to assess a lady, 88-year-old lady, Saturday, and she's losing her sight. She's a very proud woman. She's always been a professional in charge, and she doesn't take kindly to losing her sight and maybe having to be dependent on other people. So she's not exactly happy about this. And I was there listening to her talk, and she said, you know, she had a doctor dare to suggest that she should go into assisted living. And she said, I told her, why would you even think of something like that? I'll take care of myself. And so I asked her, you're going through a lot. You're losing potentially what's left of your vision. Um, you've lost your partner of long years. Do you think you might be interested in a little therapy? She said, a heck no. Like that. I mean, it was like instant. She said, I don't know where that came from, but I certainly don't have any mental health issues. Now, she is depressed, which is our number one form of mental illness in America. But this woman, who is a retired nurse that worked her whole life, college graduate, in her mind, she has no mental health problems. That's something for those people.
Is it still more of a generational
I don't I don't think
stigma that
so.
you found?
I don't
No.
think
Okay.
so because we're seeing suicides on the uptick, and certainly that's not a good sign of accessing mental health services. And we're seeing an uptick of suicide in young people here in Santa Clarita, even. So it's very disturbing. In fact, that's one reason why that you just made me think. Mental Health Hookup is collaborating with some other organizations here in Santa Clarita. We're going to put on the first ever community mental health event at a park, so it'll be user friendly. You can bring your kids, you can bring your dogs, and we want to get mental health out of the closet. And let's talk about it. And let's admit that we have mental health problems and we have mental health
And that it's normal.
solutions
And that it's normal.
and that it's normal and that we don't have to hide it and be ashamed of it. It's just part of life because it's a brain disorder, just like if you had. I just read an article last night in the newspaper. This woman was a mother and she was willing to give up custody of her child because she could not afford the level of care that her child needed. And the only way for her to do that, to get the child to get the help the child needed, and it was a teenager, was for her to relinquish custody to the county or the state or something, and then the child would then belong to the state, and they could have the funding. And she was describing how horrible that was. And just think of it. She had to love her child enough to turn her back on her child so that her child could get mental health treatment. How horrible is that?
I can't imagine being in that position.
Yeah.
But if your child needs something that badly and you
And
can't
what do we
provide it,
do?
then what do
I
you
get
do?
calls every 2 or 3 times a week from mothers that are desperately looking for resources for their family members. That's why Mental Health Hookup actually got started, was to help families find resources because there's so few. And if you have a school-age child, perhaps, keyword perhaps, the school district may collaborate with some other agencies to fund the necessary treatment. But once the child ages out, whether it's 18 or 21 or 26, it varies according to what's going on, eventually there's no more funding for that person, that child. And then what?
Or that, I guess, adult.
And then they're
At
an
that
adult,
point, yeah.
and the school district, everybody's like, we're done.
So the event that you're holding is on May 14, correct?
Saturday morning, May 14th. We hope to have it at 10 o'clock so that it's not real hot. And yes, we want everybody to come out and speak your truth.
As far as You talk about supporting each other and women supporting women, right? Uh, it could be something as simple as a girls' night out. Let's talk more about how women can be supportive of each other and their mental health, and I guess other things that you come in contact with in your practice along those lines.
Well, one of the ways, of course, that women have traditionally done, if they have informal networks, whether it was through organized religions, those some kind of missionary group or those kinds of things. And of course, once you have children, if you have children, there are various structures that tend to bring mothers together, in particular, like PTA or something going on with the schools. So there are these various structures that are informal, or they are not mental health structures, but they do support the mental health of women in particular. Um, and this takes me to thinking about stay-at-home moms,
Hmm.
um, particularly since COVID. We have seen an uptick of professional women stepping away from careers that they'd worked very hard to achieve and feeling that due to a lack of childcare or lack of consistency for their children, like maybe the school is open this week, then next week it's not open, and well, how can I hold a job like this? And so they end up feeling that they have to make the decision that they are stepping away from their career and becoming full-time moms. This is a very, very difficult decision for them to make. I see it in my own therapy practice. It's also difficult um, for us as a country. There are a lot of articles that are being written about the loss of skilled labor because women are going home, and then, of course, the strain on the marriage because maybe they bought their house um, based on both
Two incomes,
incomes,
yeah, sure.
and now they're only going to have one income. And then does that mean that the remaining worker now becomes a worker bee? I have one client that I'm seeing right now, and a lot of their issues are around the fact that their husband is working 80 hours, 90 hours a week, but not only does he feel, that he needs to work that, but also says to me, "What, she could work if she wanted to. She gets 2 or 3 hours a day off. I never get any day off, and when I'm off, I'm sleep. If I'm not sleeping, I'm working." So now he's developing a resentment about how much he's working.
This is pretty huge. I think I want to talk. I want to dive into this for the rest of the episode. Focus on mothers with school age children, professionals with school age children, and if anyone out there would like to call in and share your story, share your thoughts, any advice from Barbara, please do. 661-298-5487 is the studio line. Patty is standing by to take your calls. I know Barbara would love to speak to you. One thing before we take a break, I wanna just double back to something you said a moment ago when we were talking about the stigma that people have about therapy in general still, not just mental illness. But you said that mental illness is a brain disorder. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
So that might be one of the reasons why there's a stigma, and perhaps you could explain a little bit more what you mean about a disorder. Because when I hear that word, it sounds like something that's incurable. It sounds like something,
Actually, it's the opposite
scary.
that makes it more curable.
Okay. Well, see, that's a perfect example. So a stigma that I have personally is that was triggered by that word disorder. So you're saying that clinically, if you call it a disorder, it means that it is curable.
It's like anything else. You can have a brain disorder. You might have um, a blood disorder. You may have, not everything gets called a The thinking of mental illness for so long, just to go a little bit historic, is through let's take my favorite, schizophrenia. The symptoms of schizophrenia have been around ever since we have recorded history. No matter the culture, no matter the country, it's always been there. So why is it we can send a man to the moon on vacation even, but we have not even developed a blood test to say when an infant is born, we could test that infant and see is he at risk for schizophrenia?
And cure them of schizophrenia?
Well, right now we don't cure it because we have not.
We haven't put the brain power or the
You
money
have to
power
put the money behind the research. See, we wanted to go to the moon, so we got to the moon.
Okay, so schizophrenia is on one end of the spectrum. What about something more common like depression? You're saying
Depression has different levels.
but still curable in the sense
absolutely.
that okay.
Absolutely. But depression has there are different types of depression, and so therefore what you're looking at, what you're treating is different. One of the things that really annoys me is when I hear somebody give advice to somebody that's depressed, and they'll say, "Oh, well, you just need to go get your exercise, and that'll build your endorphins, and then you're going to be, you'll have no more depression." And I'm just like, "Are you out of your mind? What kind of advice are you, no." If a person is clinically depressed, it's all they can do to get up and go to the bathroom. Tell them to go jog? Oh, you might as well tell them to go do neurosurgery without training. They can't do it.
All right,
but it can be treated. That's the difference. It can be treated, and they can get better, and they can regain control of their lives. That's the difference. As opposed to saying, well, they're just, they're depressed, and we'll just write them off and send them out to the pasture to live until they die. That used to be kind of it.
We're talking to Barbara Wilson, licensed clinical social worker here for 50 years plus. If you'd like to talk to her, just call 661-298-5487. We welcome your calls. We'll be right back to talk about mothers of school-age children and professionals of school-age children just coming up. So stay with us right here on KHTS 98.1 FM and AM 1220.
Aloha, friends. Go check out Honu Coffee, home of the best cold brew coffee. What makes their coffee special is how their organic coffee beans are infused with nitrogen to create a smooth and delicious cup of coffee. You'll also find traditional bold coffees and island-inspired signature drinks. They're the perfect place to catch up with friends or just relax with your favorite cup of joe. Honu Coffee on Lyons and Walnut in Newhall. Stop by and say aloha.
And now for your convenience, a second Honu location at 23502 Lyons Avenue between Peachland and Apple.
The ugly truth about vertigo, and it's not a tumor. Discover the 3 most common mistakes that must change to stop vertigo for good. Hi, I'm Dr. Thomas Pilecki, and WebMD chooses me as best chiropractor and functional medicine in Santa Clarita. Something to think about. So, when you're ready to get better, go to drpilecki.com. That's drpolucki.com to schedule your free consultation now.
No words can describe the power of belonging to a group of close friends or being part of a family. Insight Treatment Center was founded more than 20 years ago to give teenagers a community of friends and family as they overcome issues like depression, anxiety, and trauma. The new Santa Clarita location is a COVID-secure environment where distance and good airflow are a priority. As a leader in providing intensive outpatient treatment to teenagers, Insight Treatment Center in Santa Clarita is here to help. Call 888-295-9995 or go online to insighttreatment.com.
I listen to it all day, every day.
Hometown, your hometown station.
Welcome back to Mental Health Hookup. I'm your host, Jason Downs. We're here with Barbara Wilson. As always, a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here and talking about mental health, especially during our celebration of Women's History Month. we're focusing on women today, and we're celebrating them, and we are thanking them for all that they do, and we are acknowledging that it's a difficult job to be a woman, especially a mother. So we wanted to dive more in to women out there who are mothers, especially of school-age children, and professionals of school-age children, as it's been especially challenging during COVID. And you had touched on that before our break, and I just wanted to circle back to that and hear about some of the, I guess, problems that you've been helping women through, and what issues they have come up against. And I mean, I can imagine that, for instance, you mentioned a professional woman, and how does she juggle the changes in schedule? How does she hold down a job? But you also mentioned how it can affect a marriage. So I'm sure you've come in contact with all those things. So I would be interested to hear more about that, as I'm sure our listeners would.
Well, thank you for that. I again, it has to do with giving voice, and what I'm seeking to do right now is to give voice to many of the women that I see or have seen in my private practice, some of whom live here locally. Many of those mothers have struggled to make a decision on what is best for the family versus what is best for their career, with the full knowledge that if they step away from their career, they will have grave difficulty, if ever, getting back to where they are right now, because they're already on a track. Maybe they're in middle management, but it took them a while to get to where they are. And if they stay where they are, then they're going to move to the next level. If they step away, then they're not going to move to that next level anytime soon, if ever. So it's a really gut-wrenching decision on a professional level, but also a gut-wrenching decision of what if I don't? My
Would a
children.
man have the same difficulty if he were to step away? Or is that
Yes,
not even really being
but
considered because...
But less likely. If a man chooses what's called the mommy track in some publications refer to it that way. If I have known men that have done that, and yes, they do lose their place in line in the promotability line. They're not as promotable because if they're in a meeting at 5 o'clock, it's like, oh, I've got to go pick up my kids from childcare. Gotta go, you guys. The difference, though, with men doing it and women doing it is usually when a man does it. Not always, but usually when I see a man who is the single parent or the primary caregiving parent, there are usually some extenuating circumstances that are readily apparent to everybody in his circle, like, oh, his wife just died, or his wife has some dreadful disease that's incurable right now. And usually that guy also has a cast of supporting characters, like, women will flock to him and say, oh, look at him, he's raising children all by himself, let's make him a pie, or let's call him up and see if he needs somebody to watch the kids so he has a break.
And a woman wouldn't normally have that same support.
They do not get the same support. No, in general, no. If women don't come with their own support system kind of baked in, like their sister, their mother, their auntie, or somebody, that is really a lot of the problem that I have seen with the women here in Santa Clarita. Is like they have no network for childcare outside of family. Well, family only goes so far. And what if you have multiple children? Well, if you have one child, yeah, I can tell you from personal experience, when I had one child, that child was like an appendage. If I decided to go to the beach, I just went to the beach. come on, we're going to the beach. And we did. But then when you have two children, everything, oh no, now you got a plan. And so if you have two or more children, now you really have to plan.
Which is difficult enough to do if you aren't struggling with depression or with, any other number of mental challenges. So what in the world does a woman do who finds herself, I mean, especially like you pointed out, these past couple of years, suddenly having to play teacher
Yes.
on top of
Yes.
mother, on top of wife, on top of.
And never getting out of the house, except when you get out of the house, you have to take the children with you. Have to. There are no other options. It's not like, okay, I'm going to take the kids to childcare or they'll go to school and then I'll run to the market and I'll get all this stuff done and I'll be back to pick them up. Over the last 2 years, there frequently has not been that choice. So it's either you're with them in the house, you're with them in the backyard so that they can get some air, or you're with them everywhere you go, they are with you. And depending on the age of the children, it may be that you hardly even get to take a shower without the children. I have one mother that even in therapy sessions, the kids were crawling all over her. She was like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, I've had kids. It's okay. But I wonder how it's affecting you. She said, oh, she just started to cry. She said, I would love to just have some time to myself, even an hour.
Speaking of, if you're listening to this right now and you're experiencing some of the things that Barbara is describing, please call. She'd love to talk to you, 661-298-5487. I think she even wants to give you a gift if it's if you feel like calling in, please do. Don't be shy. We will protect your identity, of course. So what other, again, as we think about Women's History Month, what other important issues are you finding that women in particular deal with in this day?
Well, of course, there's the whole economics of the situation. I mean, I've been mostly talking about women that are pretty professional, that are pretty high-powered from some people's perspective. But there are also women that are like first-line responders, that what we in my profession refer to as secondary trauma, that they see so much really awful stuff happening to other people, other children, and working very long hours, sometimes mandatory time, no time off, and then, when do they rest and when do they take care of their children? And what if they got exposed to COVID, then what do they do? How do they negotiate that space with their family when they want to hug their family, or their kids are like, oh, mommy's home. Oh, no, don't come any closer. I'm going to sleep in the garage because I got exposed today. All of those dynamics occur. The long shifts, that I think is just really devastating, and we see that a lot in nursing, in law enforcement, in firefighters, to the point that I think correctly so, the County of Los Angeles has deemed some kind of special service for PTSD, without having people say they have it, but just say everybody gets therapy every so many times just 'cause. And I would like to see that broadened, because I think what somebody said, people are like cars. Every so often you need to just take your car in for a tune-up. And what if we could look at mental health like that every so often you just need to go get a tune-up, get a checkup. And it just, get your wheels aligned. Get your marriage aligned. We see this with seniors. Back to depression. By the time people become 65, 70, 75 years old, my age, they've usually buried a few people, a few cats, a few dogs, and so maybe they lost a business, maybe they lost somebody close to them, and they don't see how there's enough time left to live for them to make that up, and so there's major depression. Sometimes we have retired couples. So man retires, wife retires. Now they're together all the time. Before, they were on a schedule. They got together for dinner and maybe watched a couple of TV shows and get ready for tomorrow. And they had days off. So they had that structure. In retirement, all of a sudden, they're together all the time. I cannot tell you the marital stress that I hear from married women that are like, oh my God, he's trying to tell me how to vacuum. I've been vacuuming all these years without his supervision. So this is something that goes on. A lot of people think, oh, if I could just get to retirement, life is going to be golden. Well, maybe it will. But it's a lot of togetherness and it's a lot of change. And again, I think therapy really helps. Not that I'm pushing therapy, but simply having people talk out loud about what the stresses are and admit, oh my gosh, I really don't like being around this person 24/7. Yeah, I need a break. And coming to terms, sometimes they really need to recalibrate and renegotiate the terms of their marriage, because if they've been married 50 years, the basis of, when they got married, what they agreed, well, I'm going to change the oil and you do all the stuff on the inside. Well, that was probably okay when she was 21. But now she's 65 and she's been making her own money. And she's like, I don't need to ask your permission to buy a loaf of bread. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm the man. Of course you asked my permission. Wives discover, oh, I don't have any of the passwords to any of our accounts. Is that okay? I'll leave them for you if I die. So there's no discussion about how to do things jointly in the realm of the finances, because that's the man's job, or it had been. So these are some of the stressors that happen that are I think, entirely fixable if they could just be willing to come to have a discussion about it.
Let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and we'll talk about that more. We'll talk about what happens if you don't get treatment. Okay. We're talking to Barbara Wilson here. Feel free to call in and join the conversation. 661-298-5487. In the meantime, we'll be right back. Stay with us on KHTS 98.1 FM and AM 1220.
Dr. Neil Green has been treating Santa Clarita patients and making them smile for over 35 years. As a child, Dr. Green had a fear of the dentist and disliked even simple checkups. Today, he's sensitive to your needs. If you have anxiety about getting a checkup, he understands your apprehension even if you've avoided the dentist for years. Discover the comfort of visiting a dentist with Dr. Neil Green. Dentistry is his profession. People are his focus. NeilGreenDDS.com. That's Neil, Neal Green, DDS.com.
Finding the right lawyer can be a challenge, but in Santa Clarita, there's no need to search when there's Hacker Law Group, Santa Clarita's premier litigation firm. Jeffrey Hacker has represented celebrities, financial institutions, accident victims, real estate developers, realtors, contractors, businesses, nonprofit organizations, and other individuals and companies with their legal challenges. Mr. Hacker is one of Santa Clarita's leaders, consistently listed as one of our most influential. When everything is on the line and you need legal counseling, visit hackerlawgroup.com.
SCVI is a tuition-free TK through 12 charter school that gives your child boundless opportunities to think critically and imagine freely. We offer a customized learning program built around your child's unique interests and strengths, with the only International Baccalaureate program in all of Santa Clarita. Our approach keeps students and families in step no matter where your learning is taking place. Be empowered to make your mark on the world at SCVI. To take a tour or enroll now in our one-of-a-kind program, visit ileadsantaclarita.org. iLead Schools, free to think, inspired to lead.
Your hometown station, KHTS.
Welcome back to Mental Health Hookup with Barbara Wilson. I'm Jason Downs, your host. So glad you've joined us. Mental Health Hookup is a nonprofit and is dedicated to providing clinical support to families affected by serious mental illness in Santa Clarita and beyond. So whatever your mental health services they can provide, or they will hook you up with someone who can. They should be your first and last stop for mental health in Santa Clarita. So if you or a member of your family or anyone you know is suffering from mental illness, reach out, make an appointment today at mentalhealthhookup.org or by calling 661-799-7994 to speak to a live agent 24 hours a day and make an appointment with Barbara. Barbara is with us once again. She has a Master of Social Work and has worked as a licensed clinical therapist in the state of California for over 50 years. Today we're celebrating women because it's Women's History Month, and we just want to support, validate our women and praise them and raise them up as much as we can today and always. And as always, if you want to speak to Barbara, we've got another 5 to 10 minutes here, 661-298-5487. I want to talk about, and again, we don't want to necessarily push therapy, like you said. We're not trying to do that, but I'm certainly a fan. You're certainly a fan. You've had 50 years of experience of seeing the benefits. And you even mentioned earlier in the program that if it were a product on the shelf that people could just simply buy without any stigma, it would be a bestseller because it does work. It does work. And that has certainly been my experience. So what happens when people don't treat these things? A woman is going through some of the issues we've talked about today, whether it's depression, whether it's any number of things. What happens? What happens if you don't treat these disorders that are absolutely curable?
The word that comes to my mind is festering. I used to have a colleague, she called it gunny sacking. But it's that process where people don't speak their truth. They just kind of stuff it and stuff it and stuff it. And then, the person that they're stuffing it about, like their spouse, for example, I'll call it a husband. That's just a generic term. Especially in this day and time, people may not even ever get married, but the person that is the object of their most intimate relationship with, what tends to happen is after all that stuffing, the partner says something, I call it pass the pepper, and pow, an explosion.
The most benign thing can just tip
it makes totally out of proportion to what happened. Sure. and what happens in that interaction? The man goes, women, they don't make any sense. So that's how that interaction plays out. And does that resolve anything? No. Part of the process of therapy is to help people identify what their issues are, and as we say to the children, use your words. So when you don't use your words, or when there's a disconnect between what you're thinking and what your gut is telling you, you're not able to use your words because you might be in a state of confusion, like, I think this is what's happening, but I really don't know if this is what's happening, and I don't have anywhere to process what I'm seeing and feeling, and and so this state of confusion just kind of perpetuates a level of what we call an unstable stability. So the marriage may continue, but with a relatively undercurrent of dissatisfaction. And you never know where that can take you, you know.
So what I hear you saying is that, I mean, obviously there are some mental issues that would require a
Yes.
medication.
Yes.
But by and large, just speaking your truth, speaking,
powerful,
giving voice to these things,
it's very powerful,
is the first and foremost powerful tool.
And even I have helped people come to their own conclusion about whether to try medication. Because people typically don't walk in the door saying, give me medication. If anything, it's kind of like the opposite. We wish they would take medication. And just an aside, I've never understood the people that say, I don't want to take medication, but I'm happy to take something that somebody cooked up in their bathtub and that I can get a buzz on. That never has made any sense to me. But, at least the legal medication is kind of, consistently produced. I'll just throw that out as my own personal bias of if you're going to put something in your body, it would be nice if it's approved by some kind of agent. Regulated, yes. There you go. But, it's really important. I have little tests that I've given people. I do a lot of homework because we don't plan to be in each other's lives forever. So, I want them to start from the very beginning. I give people tools that are portable, that they can use no matter where they are, whether I'm around or if I'm not around. So we can give them little tests. I give a little test and say, you can see for yourself. Try this. Come back next week and let me know, did you get out of bed? If you were an avid runner and now you never have the energy to run, because a lot of times depression presents as I'm just tired. People don't walk in the door saying, I'm depressed. But they'll often walk in the door saying, I'm so tired. I'm tired all the time. And then when I ask them, well, what's going on in your life? Oh, well, I'm sleep deprived. And I'm up with the baby all night long. Okay, I understand why you're tired. But if your answer is, I don't know why I'm tired. I don't really do anything all day and I'm still tired. Well, I'm going to suspect that maybe you might be a little bit depressed. So, it's never one thing. It's always the total package.
So, I mean, when we talk about this idea of just speaking about these things and having such power from even just speaking them, right? What do you think is the, I guess, main factor that prevents us from speaking our truth? I mean, there's
fear.
Anxiety around. Okay,
there's
sure.
Fear. There's also has been lack of access. That is one of the things that has changed within the law. Now, health insurance companies must cover mental health at the same cost the same copay that they charge for any other illness. That's a big game changer right there. The word for that is parity. We still don't have it enacted, but the legislation is there. So, but the number one problem for people accessing therapy is stigma. Their belief system, like, that means I'm crazy. I'm not crazy. Well, getting therapy doesn't mean that you're crazy. It just means that you have a safe place to talk.
Which is the perfect time to bring up your event on May 14th to close things out. Stop the stigma.
Stop the stigma.
Stop the stigma. May 14. It's at the Bridgeport
The
Park?
Bridgeport Marketplace Park.
Okay. 10 a.m.
10 a.m. Bring your
There'll
dog,
there'll
bring your
be
kids.
Vendors, there'll be...
We'll have vendors, we'll have face painting, we'll have fun.
And Barbara's offices are located on Torney Road, so please feel free to call her. There's a live agent 24 hours a day, 661-799-7994. That's 661-799-7994 to reach Barbara. As always, we'd like to thank the amazing staff here at KHTS, the owners Jerry and Carl, for their support of this program. Our fantastic engineer, Patty St. Patrick Oswika, and of course, a pleasure to have you here on Mental Health Hookup. I'm Jason Downs. We're with Barbara Wilson. You're listening to KHTS. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and stay optimistic.